Uncovered windows can make your home feel up to 20 degrees hotter. Stay cool and save up to 45% off custom window treatments during the Summer Black Friday mega sale at Blinds.com. From outdoor shades to room darkening blinds, finding the perfect fit is easy. Get free samples, expert design help, and professional measure and install services, or DIY with confidence and support every step of the way. Shop up to 45% off site-wide, plus huge savings on doorbusters right now during the Summer Black Friday mega sale at Blinds.com.
Welcome to Quiet Riot, the Cooler Heads podcast that is all chiller, no filler. I'm Naomi Smith.
And I'm Andreou, here to help separate fact from spin and light from heat, all while helping you understand the power you have to make a difference in the world.
So top up that Pims, grab your notebook and get ready for another Quiet Riot. Hello and welcome to Quiet Riot. I'm Naomi.
And I'm Alex.
And I'm Kenny.
How are we all? Have we got any views on Chris Philp in the channel getting shot at?
So many views. So many views on Chris Philp getting shot at. First of all, they missed. No, I think the whole thing is hilarious, especially the statement from the French Navy that they basically went, who? Because he was on a fishing vessel. It's not like he was on an official UK Navy thing. He was on a fishing vessel filming some piece to camera about migrants. And so they said, we weren't aware that there were any politicians on the channel, that they were doing anything in particular, that this was anything official. We have no idea who Chris Philp is. We were doing our regular exercises, and those include occasionally discharging blanks. And the hilarious thing is that Chris Philp is now trying to keep it going.
Yeah.
So he's put out a statement today. Let me read it. I don't buy the line from the French that this was routine training. It felt intimidatory and like it was done to stop us following what was happening in the channel. It felt like a warning. I am planning on contacting the French ambassador by next Monday to ask why 17 rounds were fired so close to our boat. I mean...
But also, I thought their whole shtick is that they want the French to be doing far more to deter small boat crossings. Like, surely you should be like, brilliant, they're doing what we've paid them to do.
We can stop small boats, but only if they include UK politicians, which actually is a topic will probably bleed into the B-side stuff about freedom of speech.
They want to stop cheap inflatables from crossing the channel, but Philp's ego somehow got through. I mean, the whole thing is just hilarious. The facts behind this are also quite interesting because out of 29 days so far this month, for 22 of them, there have been 0 crossings. Crossings are actually way down this summer to where they were. So whatever the Starmer government, I guess, were doing was working.
So we also have our live show coming up. Are you guys feeling prepared? Have you picked your outfits?
Oh, don't make me panic now. No. What outfit? I mean, I'll be wearing jeans and a black T-shirt.
You skank. Absolute skank.
I
bought an outfit and I'm not on stage.
Oh, do you want to take my place?
Yeah.
Do you want to take my outfit?
Listeners, if you haven't yet bought a ticket, there is still time. There are only a handful left. It's a great theatre. All the seats have got a good view of the stage, so don't be put off by the fact that it's only really the back third that has still got some space left in it. We'll leave a link in the show notes. If you're listening to this early on Thursday and you think, you know what, I haven't got plans tonight, I'd love to be able to come along. Do join us. We have been inundated with people saying, please come elsewhere in the country. We will. As a reminder, we didn't organise this live show. We've been invited to it. Our ambition always was for our first live show to be outside of London. We have not neglected that plan. We are working on it. And we do hope to be able to have a bit of a road show in the coming year. So if you can't make it to London, we will try and make it to you. If you can make it to London and you're listening to this on Thursday morning, there is still time, link in the show notes. Now, this week, we're going to be focusing on social care and Andy Burnham's big ambitions to fund it properly, take pressure off the NHS, and ensure the state helps us out when we are at our most vulnerable.
And on Friday, we'll be bringing you Quite Right B-side, where we'll be reflecting on the anniversary of the Southport attacks, the subsequent riots, and why freedom of speech advocates only ever mean their own freedom.
Quiet Riot.
England's council spent almost £30 billion on adult social care last year, and that's even before NHS contributions and other income are included. Extra money, well, it's largely gone into keeping a fragile system upright rather than dramatically widening access. Things like rising wages have increased provider costs, councils are overspending, and the means test, well, it's become meaner. The £23,250 asset threshold has been frozen since 2010 and would now be above 35 grand if it merely kept pace with inflation. Keir Starmer's answer to all this was an independent commission, of course it was, whose final recommendations were not due until 2028. Now, this week, Andy Burnham brought that deadline forward to next summer, launched what's being called a big conversation on care, and promised to build a national care service alongside the NHS. He said England's current system was, and I quote, as unfair as American healthcare. He accused his own generation of politicians of a dereliction of duty, and he warned that the NHS itself cannot survive unless care is fixed.
A national care service. Well, why do we talk about that? Because we need to talk about a system that can become highly integrated with the NHS. Social care is different. It has to be person-centred. If it's not person-centred, like the brilliant care provided here at Jewish Care, then it won't be what people would recognise as social care. You don't want to over-medicalise care, but it has to be very integrated with the rest of the system. It has to be preventative in its character. It has to be person-centred. And that's what we're asking Louise to give us her report on. How do we deliver a national care service in England that sits alongside the National Health Service, works in a similar way, that is highly integrated and can optimise the journey of a patient. If a patient's leaving home to hospital, back as quickly as possible, and there's no delay. We also then ask for a principle of home care wherever possible, so that we have an approach that supports people where they should be and often where they want to be, rather than ending up in a hospital bed. So how do we deliver a national care service? And there are different ways of doing it. You could do the fully fledged version, or you could do a lesser version. And you could do something in between. And then you have the question of how you pay for all of those options. But that's the stuff of the review. And the big conversation will feed that review. And again, I would ask everybody to engage with it in that way.
But did the speech contain considerably more passion than policy? Burnham did not rule out tax rises. He did not tell us what the state will ultimately provide for free. And he didn't explain whether a national care service means public ownership, national standards, or simply a shinier sign above the same crumbling door. He has invited Kemi Badenoch and Ed Davey into cross-party talks, while excluding Reform and the Greens. So, is this finally the beginning of social care reform? Or has Britain just commissioned its 23rd explanation of why the first 22 achieved bugger all? Alex, kick us off. What did Burnham actually announce today, once you scrape off all the Burnham rhetoric?
There was quite a lot in there, actually. We've become accustomed to things being so dry, I think, that it's very easy to mistake something that sounds like human speech as pure rhetoric. But it wasn't. There was quite a lot of stuff in there. So he has brought forward the Casey review by a year. That's a firm commitment. He has initiated cross-party talks. He announced something on a recruitment drive. So it's around the staffing, because at the moment there's real staffing shortages. And he said basically that the pay deal that had been agreed, he will bring that forward and then announce something additional to do with progression paths, so that people can start in social care and maybe progress to the NHS, which seems to me quite sensible. And he has put together a multi-departmental task force that includes Yvette Cooper, who's now Health Secretary, Angela Rayner, who is Secretary of Housing and, importantly, Communities and Local Government, and John Healey. I'm quite encouraged by that approach, actually, because the plan depends on where do you take money from and where do you put it in order to get better results. And yes, look, we are entitled to a level of cynicism because there have been so many reviews. But I would draw a line between the 2 or 3 reviews that were genuinely a look into the thing and the reviews that were effectively just playing for time with no intention to actually do anything about it. I think the review that preceded Theresa May's disastrous call of an election was a genuine attempt to do something, but that got completely pommeled in the polling booth because of how poorly it was presented and pitch-rolled, etc. I think there was a genuine attempt in the last couple of years of the Brown government again to do something about it. So not all reviews are equal.
Well, when he was Secretary of State for Health and Social Care.
That's true.
At the time. And
he fucked it up, and he sort of owned up to that. But it's the nature of the thing for this to fail until it doesn't fail. You know, it's like the Wright brothers test flights. They all come crashing down until one doesn't. I'm encouraged by what I heard.
I am so encouraged by it. And for the first time in decades, I'm feeling hopeful and buoyed and grateful and relieved and all these wonderful emotions that I just haven't experienced when observing politicians for such a long time. Why did I love it? Well, first of all, here was somebody, as you just touched on, Alex, not afraid to say, I got it wrong. And the brittleness that preceded him, I can just never imagine those words coming out of any of the ministers. This isn't, Starmer, but the tone of the previous government was so much more defensive and frustrated anger that people weren't hearing them and weren't understanding what they were trying to do. And here you had somebody confident enough in their position to fess up. I got it wrong. I did not handle it well enough last time. I didn't bring people with me on the journey. I left it too close to an election. So there was a humility and a confidence that allows you to be humble that shone through. I love that he mentioned migrant carers really early on in the speech. I thought that was such a breath of fresh air. And, I punched the sky when he did it. I was like, wow, yes, somebody talking up the benefits of brilliant migrants that come to this country and do the most important jobs. I love that he touched on the fact that we often pay the most important jobs that we have the least wages, the lowest kind of wages. I know we're going to talk about that aspect of it a bit later. And then there was the questions from the media. And here was somebody reveling in it. It was somebody confident and asking to be scrutinized and to be challenged. And at the end of the press conference, because I think there was a kind of a list of who'd been sort of designated a chance to ask a question, he goes, oh, has anyone else got any other questions? And you can see his staff going, no, we've got to go, Andy. What are you talking about? You've got to get to your next appointment.
He did the Tony Blair thing, which was like,
whereas so
he didn't
often
leave the room until everyone was satisfied that they had their questions
exactly
answered.
That. Yeah. Do you know what it reminded me of? A very lovely, confident headmaster that all the kids actually like. They might not like their form tutor, or they might not like their geography teacher or whatever, but they're quite keen on the head because he's down with the kids, he's quite cool, but he's in control. He has got the respect of the room, he's able to command it. It hit so many of the right notes. I was extremely impressed by it and very, very, very happy. And this is not just because I've gone through dealing with an elderly parent in care in recent years and sort of seen the failings of the system. It's very much for me as a political observer, finally breathing a sigh of relief that we've got someone who has a vision, who cares and can communicate it with confidence.
How about you, Kenny?
Look, I shared the enthusiasm you both have for the delivery. I was really particularly pleased that A, he took ownership of the issue, but also B, that he's taken ownership of it in only the second week of his premiership. This is a problem that tends to get kicked into the long grass, and it gets raised nearer election time because by that stage, nothing's going to happen anyway. So if the wheels come off, nothing to worry about. Well, my journalist head on will remain more sceptical until we see more of the details, because like all Burnham's other big speeches, the delivery's been really good. The lack of detail has been quite noticeable, inevitably at this stage. But
I think there's a bravery that you've touched on to be prepared to tackle something that actually won't be a vote winner. This is probably not going to be something that will convince, millions of people to switch their vote back to the Labour Party. A lot of people have no contact with the care system at all, or they haven't yet. We all kind of broadly accept that in a civilized society, we should look after the vulnerable, but it's not, the thing that's going to make them turn out of the ballot box. So I think, and he will know that, and I think to take it on and to show and demonstrate that he understands the interconnectedness of issues. And he talked at length about how the intersection with the economy, with NHS pressures, with the ability to treat other things is so important. And finally, we've got someone that kind of gets that big picture sitting above the minutiae of the day-to-day running of government and, small interventionist policies that perhaps we all feel and see more readily and that do help you win over segments of the voting electorate. I am now confident that we've got somebody who is prepared to A, take brave decisions early, B, take them because they're the right thing to do, not just because they're going to help him win an election. And that he gets this interconnectedness of how life actually works.
Quiet, Riot.
Amazon Health AI presents Painful Thoughts.
Why did I search the internet for answers to my cold sore problem? Now I'm stuck down a rabbit hole filled with images of alarmingly graphic sores in various stages of ooze. I can clear my search history, but I can never unsee that.
Don't go down the rabbit hole. Amazon Health AI gets you the right care fast. Healthcare just got less painful.
Hey, it's Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. Now, I was looking for fun ways to tell you that Mint's offer of unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month is back. So I thought it would be fun if we made $15 bills. But it turns out that's very illegal. So there goes my big idea for the commercial. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3 months, $90 for 6 months, or $180 for 12-month plan required. $15 per month equivalent. Taxes and fees extra. Initial plan term only. Greater than 50 gigabytes may slow when network is busy. See terms.
Quiet, Riot.
I agree with everything you say, Naomi, but I am sort of with Kenny in that there's been so much trauma of always getting my hopes up that I am determined to stay cautious and suspicious this time. I don't want to throw because it could be someone that is very good at the presentation but not good at the delivery. In Starmer, his tragedy really is that he did quite a lot of good stuff. We were just talking about the migrant crossings, and I know what you say about the European Union also taking action. Of course, that's part of it. But there has been an improvement in relations with France. There has been an improvement in joint action. So he was kind of really hopeless at the presentation, but did quite a lot on the delivery side. So I'm going to wait to see signs of both, if that makes sense. The presentation, I agree, is A+++ at the moment.
I am disagreeing with neither of you on the need to maintain skepticism because, look, it is a week in. What I will say is he's having a honeymoon period, which Starmer did not manage to have. So it's not just the delivery of the comms, it is also the comms strategy. It's learning from those lessons of don't come in and be all doom and gloom and then take, pensioners' winter fuel allowance away from them during a vacuum in other news, meaning that dominates for 2 months. Yeah, but you are right. There will be exogenous factors. Things are going to happen around the world that he's going to have to react to that are going to interrupt his agenda, that are going to make the cost pressures on delivery even higher. He's got to get a budget through. We know all of these things are still to come. So you are right. And, I've sort of spent the day with the Jiminy Cricket on my shoulder saying, Naomi, don't get so excited. Calm down.
Still my beating heart.
The whole bounce. Well, what is a bounce? A bounce is something that goes up and then comes back down. So, all of those caveats apply.
What is encouraging is that he wasn't entitled to a honeymoon period.
No.
On the strict politics of it, because he's taken over from an existing administration. So he has engineered a honeymoon period and is making the most of it.
Yeah.
Because he will never be as powerful as he is right now within his own political setup. And so that is really encouraging to see.
Can I ask you guys, do you think that Burnham's proposed National Care Service genuinely has the makings of what we might describe as being an NHS for care?
I think at the moment he hasn't decided. What I'm getting is that they are genuinely being consultative. They are asking for the various stakeholders and people to tell them what they're willing to bear in terms of cost and what they think this thing should be doing, which is also quite encouraging to see. I mean, the starting point is that the current system just doesn't work and that it has huge knock-on costs for loads of other areas that are making the country quite unproductive and inefficient and have a huge cost in terms of human misery, to be honest. I thought he was saying there is a kind of going the whole hog way, which I feel quite a lot of people have been briefing, even from within the care industry, as it were, and the charities that support. And Laila Moran on the side of the Lib Dems was saying the same thing in reaction, that the whole hog way is probably a step too far in the current economic circumstances. And so we're looking at maybe something like the Scottish system that Kenny is going to tell us about, all about. What was your impression? That he was pushing for the full thing, or that he was open to in-betweeny options?
I think it's his North Star. That's where he'd love us to get to. But you're right, he's going to wait for the KC review to report. He has now brought that forward by a year, so we won't have to wait until 2028 for it. And in fact, he did quite a funny thing to the media, basically saying, "Oh, look, here's an extra scoop for you. No, that we're not going to have the election," which of course is the big rumor that's doing the rounds at the moment. So I think, if you want X, ask for Y, and you might end up with X and a half. It's that kind of approach.
Yeah, maybe.
And I think he would love to get us to that place. But I think what he is also beginning to articulate is knowing the cost of everything is to know the value of nothing. And he did explain, in very personal terms, and I think he was probably drawing on the experience he'd had with his own father, about the issues in care, particularly if you are an at-home carer or you are somebody who comes into somebody's home to care for them. If you cannot do the thing that is needed in that moment, ring 999. Which is usually not what the patient needs, is not in their best outcome. They then have an admission into the hospital system. They then end up being in hospital longer than they need to be while a proper care package is put in place. That it often results in health deterioration, mobility deterioration, etc. for the patient, and then they come out even more dependent on care than they would have been if there'd been better intervention earlier on that was more appropriate. So I think what he's probably helping to spell out is the point that you've made very well on this show before, Alex, around welfare reform, that reforms will upfront cost money before they can begin to then demonstrate value and smooth out costs across departments, if not bring them down in the long term.
Quiet, Riot. Alex, can we, with that in mind, can we talk money? Because it seems to be the part of the equation that nobody has any idea about. Whether it's an NHS for care or not really depends on, of course, what care people are legally entitled to, whether that entitlement is consistent across England, that we're talking about right now, and how much they must pay. Now, Burnham says that billions are being wasted because care failures leave people stuck in hospitals. Is it the case that reforms could pay for themselves?
Not completely, is the truth. If one looks at the current pots, there are probably significant savings to be made in the NHS budget, for instance, by freeing beds and frontline workforce to deal with minor conditions keeping working people out of work, or, for instance, knock-on costs that are estimated to be about 2 billion for the NHS, just under 2 billion for the NHS, and the local authority budget, which is forced at the moment, for instance, to hire loads of casual and agency workers instead of being able to offer permanent positions, which are, economically much more efficient for the council, but would require an upfront investment. And so I thought the key phrase was, at the moment, we are paying for the cost of failure rather than investing in success. And I think that's true not just in social care, but in so many areas of the state. Because we're kind of on the back foot, we end up paying a lot more money than we should be paying if things had been planned and were running properly. The same applies with the benefit system, I think. And so there are savings to be made, but I don't think they will cover the whole lot. What's interesting is this: there is no up-to-date estimate of the full extent of individual spending on adult social care. In 2016, 2017, the National Audit Office estimated at just under £11 billion. That's individuals paying for their own social care. So I would say the very first thing we need is better data, so we understand the size of the problem. I was also very surprised to see stakeholder organizations like the King's Fund, for instance, and I quote from their review: all of the solutions outlined above, with the exception of private insurance, offer improvements over the current system, but all come at a cost. Private insurance comes at a cost. It's just not the state paying it. You're paying it directly. So there's this weird idea that if we make people pay for it, no one is paying for it because it doesn't show up on the state's books. Forcing people into private insurance is still a tax. It's just another kind of tax, because it's not like you can subsist without healthcare, right? We can't get to the American system where basically if a snake bites you, you go bankrupt. And so surely this has to be a conversation about what's the most efficient thing to do. If it's the most efficient thing to do, like with the NHS, for all of us to pool risk and basically then take out of the pot on the basis of need, I don't know. I think a lot of deep thinking has to be done. We have to look at other systems. And one of the systems we can look at, Kenny, is Scotland. Because, of course, whenever we talk about national health service, it's not really a national health service in terms of the UK. Like, each constituent bit has its own system. So how do they do things in Scotland?
Well, I mean, you're right. Care, social care, as well as health, is devolved to the Scottish, Welsh and Northern Irish authorities. I think that Scotland, to take it as an example, it offers Burnham both an example and a warning as well. If we take the example first, the example is free personal care. Since 2002, people who've been assessed as needing help with things like washing themselves, dressing themselves, eating, using the loo, the basics of day-to-day life, they've not been charged for that support. But the name free personal care is a bit more generous than the policy. It doesn't cover things like accommodation or food or cleaning or other ordinary living costs, which can still be means tested. And adopting even that model in England would be expensive. I had to dig around. The Health Foundation did some estimates on this, and they reckon that a Scottish-style entitlement for England would cost about $7.5 billion a year by 2036. So there you go. There's some good stuff there. But there is a warning as well. And the warning is Scotland's attempt at a national care service. Okay, and this is really at the heart of what Burnham was hinting at today, a national care service. The Scottish Government planned to transfer social care responsibilities from councils into a new national organisation. But that scheme, as is the way with schemes like this, became bogged down in a whole bunch of disputes. There were disputes over costs, over accountability, and there were disputes over centralisation itself as well. And the central proposal was eventually abandoned just last year, I think, actually, as being unworkable as things stand. And let's face it, Scotland still faces the same underlying problems as England. It's got rising costs, it's got recruitment difficulties as well, it's got all that
aging
pressure.
Population.
Yeah, waiting lists, pressure on unpaid carers, which we should always remember. So free personal care, what we can take from Scotland, free personal care changes who receives the bill. It doesn't by itself create the staff or the capacity needed to deliver the service. So creating a giant new national agency isn't necessarily the same thing as improving care, I think, is the too long didn't read version of that.
Yeah, and unpaid carers is actually another point where there are costs that are not entirely visible. We don't really, there 1.5 million people are providing over 50 hours of care per week to loved ones. And many of those have to withdraw partially or fully from employment as a result.
Exactly.
So how much productivity and GDP and tax revenue are you losing from that person being forced perhaps from a highly paid, maybe highly productive job into doing something that someone else can do better than they can do because they're a professional in that thing and they have the skill set for that thing. So what do you think, Naomi?
Yeah, look, I come back to what Andy Burnham was saying about a plural approach. And when you are doing something as enormous as major social care reform, you actually do have no choice but to engage with other political parties and their supporters, and this national conversation combined with him talking to Kemi Badenoch and Ed Davey is the right one, not least because, of course, Ed Davey has a child who requires 24/7 round-the-clock care, which is provided, as I understand it, at home. And Ed Davey knows all too well, and I think he also had caring responsibilities for other family members as a child. I think his mum required it. That we mustn't forget those that are sacrificing their own careers and incomes to look after loved ones, as parents often have to also do. And this is yet another part of our productivity puzzle and our inability to grasp a more Scandinavian approach to how we juggle work-life balances in this country. So I think what we saw today was somebody who has a genuine understanding. I mean, of course, he was the minister for this department in 2010 under the Brown government, just before the election that they then lost. So he understands it professionally, he has an understanding of it personally, and he also has this values-driven approach of consensual decision-making for the country, with the country, by the country.
Quiet Riot. When you're a mid-sized business, you need every competitive advantage you can get. Like an AI solution that works for you, not against you. SAP Grow is built with AI embedded at its core, working across every system. And it's ready to go from day one, so you can hit the ground running. Bring it with SAP Grow, AI Cloud ERP for any size business.
Hey parents, how do you make smarter choices for your kids' college today? That's where Sally can help. With Sally, you can find scholarships, funding options, tools, and guidance all in one place. And if you need a loan, Sally has options for different families and different situations. College is only worth it if you do it right. So don't just help your kid go. Help them go smarter. Sally.com/GoParents.
Quiet Riot.
Can I ask you something, Naomi? Because you mentioned the Scandinavian model. And although not Scandinavian, I have a friend visiting from Germany at the moment who has just gone through, with his father who had dementia, has just gone through what I went through with my mother when I cared for her when she had Alzheimer's. I had a very interesting conversation with him about how care homes are very different in Germany, how it's much more assisted living and assisted living communities. It's very normalized that someone reaches a particular age and they have to sort of downsize from a big house, maybe with stairs or whatever, into a community. It's not sort of a stigma for the family. It doesn't feel like you're parking someone in a ghastly place just to wait for death to come. And is that maybe one of the things that has to change about our attitude to these things, so that we plan, so that it's clear in our head that the time will come when living in the home I've always lived in ceases to be the most important thing. Actually, being able to live independently because I'm in a place that has the right setup for that is more important than holding on to the big property.
Absolutely. And I think the bit that made me realise today in the
What was that, Lil? What was that, Lil?
Well, it's my inner lefty coming out. He
Oh, yeah.
basically...
Better underwear, Naomi.
It's nice to know that's the noise she makes. We will know in future.
Pictures available on our website, listeners.
We've talked a lot about the fact that, he hasn't really created enemies yet. He hasn't put detail on how things are going to be funded, etc. But there was a hint of it in the speech today. And he was basically taking aim on private equity in the care home system. And he says, we have got to end the profiteering of the care home system. And culturally in this country, and, this is all part of his, we've had neoliberalism that's failed us for 40 years and we've got to end it now. We got it wrong under Thatcher, and the last, 40 years has basically set us on the road to a pretty poor place where we find ourselves now. This is all knitting together towards delivering on that. I can't imagine previous... I mean, even Jeremy Corbyn didn't do that. Even Jeremy Corbyn didn't say, I'm going to end neoliberalism. And so just hearing words like, profiteering being framed negatively when it comes to doing something so fundamentally valuable and important for caring for vulnerable people, I thought is, such a fantastic sign. And of course, private equity is a huge part of the problem, and the cost cutting that gets involved in these organisations. I saw that firsthand with my own father, who was in 2 care homes before he passed away. The pressures on the managers to balance the books and create the return for the people sat in their ivory towers hundreds of miles away was very real. There is a lot that he's trying to learn from other countries. And we saw it a little bit as well when he began to talk about the Milburn Review and young people not being in employment and education and training. And the things that he started to talk about feel quite German. And Germany is a much better example of a country that ensures local employers are working with and supporting local training, local colleges in schools, so that the workforce coming out of education is appropriate for the industry that is in that area. So I think, he does draw inspiration from beyond the UK border in a lovely Northern European way. Maybe he was touching on it a little bit when he was talking about council tax banding not being right. We've got to begin to incentivize people to leave big homes that they no longer need, free those up for people who have got growing families, and to make it this much more natural and motivating transition as you go through different stages of life.
Can I just add to what you said there, because that was very insightful. My experience of dealing with the care home system over the last couple of years has been, I think I can echo a lot of what you said, but also I think it's important to remember that a lot of private and charitable providers operate on incredibly thin margins, because the council fees that they receive for looking after council patients, if you want, don't come even close to covering the real cost of care. And what happens, of course, is that self-funding residents then often pay an awful lot more than the councils are paying for effectively the same place and the same service. Exactly that. So there's already a subsidising going on there, and it's a hidden subsidy. And simply declaring that private providers are wicked, I think there's also that risk that you start shutting homes faster than the state or the voluntary sector, not-for-profit sector, could replace them. So, when I was talking to people behind the scenes, they were talking about being a sensible answer would involve things like much more open book accounting, yes, better financial regulation, clear and fairer commissioning rates, and a much larger role for the not-for-profit and community providers as well, who already know what they're doing, but they don't know how to generate obscene levels of profit.
Alex, let's just talk about the workforce of the care sector for a bit. The care sector in the UK employs more people than the NHS, right? You've got 1.6 million people working in care. And then last year, Starmer government made a decision to end overseas care worker visa routes from, I think it was exactly a year ago, I think it was July 2025 that was meant to come in, and their proposed alternatives were fair pay agreements and boosting domestic recruitment. So we know that Burnham has got this real ambition to get young people opting for a career in care, and you mentioned maybe going on then into the NHS after that. But in that interim, can he deliver on this ambition, whether it's the National Care Service or something short of that, without reopening overseas recruitment?
I don't think so. And I think, like you, I didn't punch the air. I actually got a little bit teary when he mentioned migrant workers, because it's felt like there's been such a sustained period where I felt, as an immigrant to this country, just constantly kicked on every issue. You said, how many people are employed in the social care sector. Well, that's how many people should be employed in the social care sector.
Yeah.
But we're about a fifth short of that number at the moment. And so when he mentioned it, I found myself getting emotional, because I had spent the entire morning listening to the Today program and Sky News and ITV breakfast, and the word immigration was not mentioned once. And I had become so frustrated. I was like, how can you talk about solving social care without addressing the people that will do those jobs and who do currently those jobs? So let's have a little listen.
There's lots I can say about what's wrong with the system. I will come to that. But I want to start with what's good about the system, because sometimes when we talk about social care, we don't do that enough, do we? And I see so much good in terms of the journey that we've been on. And I'm talking about the people who've cared for my dad. Hundreds of them we've seen and we've watched. You know, when someone in your family is receiving care, you look at everything through new eyes, don't you? You notice things that maybe you didn't notice before because you watch it so closely and so carefully. And I've just been really, overwhelmed by their care, the skill in what they do, the professionalism. It really is incredible, and it's humbling to watch them caring for someone else's dad or someone else's mum. If you think about that, bringing all of that to the care of someone else's relative, it's just an incredible thing, isn't it? That, to me, they should be the best paid people in society, not the worst. And, I just start with that feeling. And I need to say this, because many people from other countries have been caring for my dad. I want those carers to know we appreciate you. We appreciate what you are doing to support people here. And that really matters that I say that. It is incredibly demanding and skillful what they do, and that needs to be recognised.
This is where we get into the weeds of it, because these three things are true at once, right? So there are hedge funds and big companies that have developed in the system and are creaming quite a lot of profit off the top. There are intermediaries who provide the services, who provide the casual workers, who make quite a lot of profit off the top, while carers themselves are paid a pittance. And the social care home system is hanging by a thread. So all those things are true. Care homes are really struggling to stay afloat. Care workers are paid very poorly, and there is a private profit incentive in the area that's maybe not acting for the good of society. And why should they? It's not in the company's purview. So according to the latest report, the median hourly rate for a care worker in England is £12.60, and almost half of care workers are paid below the real living wage. So that's a big piece of the puzzle, right? You have to make those jobs attractive. And how many times have we talked in the last year about anxiety, about the sort of jobs that will be lost to artificial intelligence?
Yeah.
Here is a set of jobs that absolutely necessitate a human at their center. So why don't we re-gear towards the thing we need and make it an attractive career and something that people want to do? Because I can tell you from personal experience, it is incredibly rewarding, as well as being very challenging, very difficult, and certainly underpaid. It is immensely rewarding. I think social care workers are the most tired people that I ever meet, and they're also the happiest people.
They're the most uplifting people
that I ever meet. They know what they stand for. They know what side they're on, and they're very, very happy with the job they're doing. They just need to be looked after properly, really. Kenny, is there mixed into this a sort of issue about inheritance and, what happens to my house if I need care, and sort of I guess, a generation of people not wanting to let go of material wealth.
Look, it's an issue, but it's not the main issue. It winds me up when coverage of this topic often distorts the debate by pretending that this is mainly an issue about old people and inherited houses. I mean, we need to remember that almost half of local authority adult social care spending supports working age adults. Okay, it's not old people, it's working age adults. That includes people with learning disabilities, with severe physical disabilities. It includes those who are really forgotten by government after government, who have mental health needs, those with acquired conditions. And I was looking around the figures and requests from adults, so aged 18 to 64. They've grown far faster than the population has in that age group as well. So this is a growing issue as far as care is concerned. Then we've already mentioned the millions of unpaid carers whose health, whose earnings and whose careers are damaged because formal support is absent. And on top of that, if you bring in paid carers, they feed back into the economy via the tax system and the other systems as well. So a workable care system is part of the country's underlying economic infrastructure. It does allow disabled people who are not pensioners to live independently, and it enables relatives, who are, we should remember, disproportionately women, to remain in employment and to pay back into the country as well. Now, look, the house selling story does matter for one reason, because it illustrates the catastrophic personal risk that is out there and that some people face and others don't. But social care is very definitely not merely an inheritance protection scheme for affluent old people. Wrong to think that.
I wonder again if it comes down to a rather uncontinental attitude towards your main residential property as a sort of nest egg, a sort of investment. I think again,
well, Germany's such a good example, because rental property is the norm in Germany in the way that buying your property is the norm in this country. So the baseline for our approach to property at all stages in our life is completely different. And I think that's a huge, huge part of the challenge.
Naomi, did Burnham also rather unexpectedly, well, I guess he had a question on it, but did this also feed into the assisted dying story as well?
Well, thanks to Sam Coates, who had at least a veneer of humility to say, I hope this doesn't come across as crass, but, and then said, what does this mean? Your view is on assisted dying. And I thought Andy Burnham, answered that pitch perfect. He was not at all flustered by the question. I know that he does personally support it, but he didn't make that point. He said that is a debate that needs to be had. But what the public will rightly expect before a decision is made on that is for improvements in palliative care and social care to happen. And he is correct in that. And I say that as somebody who is an advocate for assisted dying.
I guess my concern is the number of people who will suffer in the intervening period while we try to sort out thing A, before we say that we are in a position to approach thing B, which is actually a separate discussion. I'm not sure on this one. I think I have to let it filter before I form a view.
I thought his answer was very, very good. It was on point, and the idea that offering people assistance to die while failing to guarantee assistance to live creates a troubling imbalance. But I did also wonder if there'd be a follow-up question that said something along the lines of, it's been 30 years plus that we've been trying to sort a care system. If Burnham's plan starts, how many more decades is it going to be morally acceptable to deny oxygen to the assisted dying debate? So potentially the storing up of a very live problem, to use that word, for the years ahead for somebody.
As a media person, or a reformed media person, Kenny.
Steady.
There was an interesting call to the media, wasn't there? It was the only bit of the exchange that was sort of amicably spiky. Spiky. Let's have a little listen.
I think the system isn't right. If everybody on the NHS principle contributed a little, it would mean everyone could protect the majority of what they'd worked for. Now, I know the Mail probably and the Telegraph doesn't support that, but I don't know. Do people support that? And this is the point. What I got wrong, as I said before, was going too close to a general election when there just wasn't time for those issues to breathe. And I do ask colleagues in the media again, can we not let the country look at this in a quite clear-eyed way, without all of the hype and the sort of the overwriting of some of these issues. On this issue, I just ask it again, on this issue, please, can we have a factual debate? Can we allow people to weigh up the different options that Louise might put forward and then just come to a considered view based on those facts? Is that too much to ask? I don't think it should be too much to ask, because I think the public will give us their view. They'll make it really clear what they feel they can accept and what they can't. But we won't get to that point if there's all of this stuff swirling around and everyone frightened about everything. That just won't get us there. So we're all in this together. But yeah, I learned from that experience last time. I'm initiating cross-party talks today rather than a few weeks before a general election. So you live and you learn as a politician. But I hope that applies to everybody too. Let's do it better this time, and it does apply to everybody.
So is there an implied criticism there of the ecosystem acting as actually an obstacle to proper national solutions to these proper big problems?
I don't know it was that implied. You know, I mean, yes, it's a short answer. I mean, what he's saying
is there any way that media people sitting in that room will actually hear him and think, yeah, all right, let's not be ghastly about this?
It's not their decision. They're not running the media outlets. They're there to provide the stories and the headlines that are asked for a lot of the time. Look, I mean, we should, if I'm being a grown-up about it, he's not just having a go at the media. What he's, I think, saying is the problem isn't just bad policy, but there's an issue around the political media ecosystem that has a habit of turning every potentially tricky solution that he puts forward into an electoral weapon for somebody. We know this stuff. Social care reform becomes immediately a death tax or a dementia tax if you're on the other side of the house. And so what happens is the headlines scream, the opposition piles in, and governments are forced to retreat. So it's not just an implied criticism of the media, not that we would pay any attention to that. Can I just say, though, that there's an element of caution here. I think Burnham dodged it today, but if he does want attention to be paid, for example, to his social care announcement, he's going to be well advised not to give the media and opposition politicians a juicy alternative. Tomorrow, I could see editorial lines that, Burnham gagging to gag the press, for example. If you can't stick to your key message, man, then you're failing on Communications 101. But I must admit, I gave a wry smile at that little exchange.
I would be interested in an actual straightforward reply as well, Kenny. Is he right? Do they overwrite these things in order to sort of petrify people, and then they become impossible to discuss in a rational way?
I think it's a very human response. It's habit. It's habit with the people who run these media organizations, and it becomes habit if you're part of the teams that run those organizations as well. And habits are very, very difficult to break. I mean, they're incredibly difficult to break. I'm actually, is it pleasantly surprised by how little mischief making has gone on in the first 10 days. Partly, I think it's down to the weather. I genuinely think that's had various impacts on it. But you try breaking, and a lot of them, they're not all old men, but a lot of them are old men who make these decisions behind the scenes, both in the political parties and in the media organizations, and trying to stop those old dogs playing their old tricks. It's a big old ask. But, we live in hope.
Alex, how have Reform reacted to...
Oh, exactly as you would expect. I mean, it's almost like Kenny wrote their statement, basically, as he was saying, wouldn't it be awful if people went... They said that. I quote from the release, Robert Jenrick, this is, railing against the establishment that he was part of until 5 minutes ago. Make no mistake, today Andy Burnham fired the starting gun on his scheme to raid the little money that hundreds of thousands of regular people have struggled to save over their lifetime. That's why he can't rule out a new universal death tax. And the Tories and Lib Dems are conspiring with Labour to foist this tax on a country that has rejected it 4 times. So, blah, blah, blah. It's sort of exactly as expected. It is so boring now.
Even if you've not had to navigate the care sector yourself, you may well have to at some point in your life, either for a loved one or for yourself. So this is an issue that we should all take action on, right?
Yeah, I think so. I respond to the consultation is the call to action. And I will give you a personal example, right? So I was looking after an elderly parent in a rotation with my 2 sisters. that was in another country. And that meant, for instance, that I was not entitled to any support for that. But also I was not entitled, for instance, when I was with mum for stints of 6 months, I was not entitled to a discount of council tax, which I would be entitled if I could provide a British postcode of where my mother's house was. But the system was built in a way that you couldn't say, well, actually, my parent is in another country. So when I leave this house for an extended period because I'm looking after them, I'm not in this country. Something very individual like that, I think you can't assume that people involved with this inquiry will know that, this particular kink in the system, and you can't assume that someone else will let them know it's there. You have to take personal action and write into the consultation and say, this is my experience of the care system, not in broad terms, but in really specific ways that you found the system worked against you, because that's what makes a difference actually to the final product. We are all, in a way, the better testers of government policy. And we have to make giving constructive feedback on how the product is working part of our everyday life.
Quiet, Riot.
And now it's time for some good news. Not that what we've been discussing, it was bad news, it was good news, but on a rather gloomy subject, I suppose. So it's time for Grin and Share It.
Good news is welcome to me. Bad news is hell come to me. Good news. Do-de-o-do-lo, I want good news.
What have you got for us today, Naomi?
Well, it's quite apt because you talked about people moving into retirement homes, assisted living earlier, and I have a story set in a retirement home. Now, I don't know about you, but when I think of a Floridian retirement community, a retirement community based in Florida, it doesn't scream woke liberal residents, if I'm honest, which is what makes this story all the funnier. So apparently in that there, America, they do things a little bit differently when it comes to your annual car tax. So, and maybe it's on a state-by-state basis, but certainly in Florida, when you pay your annual vehicle tax or renew your license for that vehicle or whatever it is, occasionally, I don't think it happens every year, but maybe every few years, the state will then send you a new license plate or vehicle tag. And in the middle of the plate is usually the symbol of the state. So in the case of Florida, that is two very juicy oranges, some plump citrus in the middle.
I'm concerned about where this might be going. No.
Well,
I'm hopeful.
When 77-year-old Nancy, resident of a retirement home in Miami, opened her post recently, it did contain a new plate for her car. And the plate read SQZ, so Sierra Queen Zulu, insert picture of two juicy oranges, A55, Alpha 55. And from a distance, i.e. a distance of sat in a car behind her vehicle, her number plate definitely looked like squeeze my juicy ass. And Nancy was not impressed. Let's have a little listen.
And I looked at it and I said, I don't think so.
The plate reads SQZ-A55, but from a distance, those 55s can be read as S's. Well, you get the picture. Squeeze blank.
I don't think a woman that lives in a senior community that's going to be 77 years old next month will be driving around with what this plate has to say.
The plates become the talk around her retirement community, especially the men. We were with her when she showed it to one of her 89-year-old neighbors.
And this is what I received from the DMV for my new license plate. That's good for 10 years. Good.
But her, I assume, adult children have talked her down from the ledge. They have convinced her to keep her squeezy ass number plate, even though the Florida licensing department offered to change it for her for free. And now Nancy has conceded at her age, it might even be quite funny to receive a few honks from people in cars who would quite like to squeeze her juicy ass. So let it never be said that Quiet Riot does not embrace silly season.
She reminds me very much of a quote from a film that's very close to my heart called Torch Song Trilogy, where his mother, played by Anne Bancroft, is complaining about how awful her retirement community is in Florida. And he asks her, "Ma, what do you want to do instead?" And she says, "I want to die. Until then, I'll go to Florida."
I heard a very funny Jewish joke the other day. It was 3 Jewish mums sat around, and one of them says, "Oh, you know what my son did for my birthday? He chartered a yacht and he took me out onto the West Coast, and we had this most amazing day on this private yacht and all the food and drink we could want. It was amazing." And then the other mother says, "That's absolutely nothing. My son hired a private jet. You know, he flew me to Italy. We had a fortnight in the sun. It was absolutely incredible. We stayed in a mansion. Oh, the whole thing was wonderful." And the third mother says, "That's absolutely nothing. My son has been going to see a psychotherapist every week for 50 years. It costs him $200 every time he goes. And the only thing he talks about is me."
I love it. You know, my favorite Jewish joke, and it's a very short one, so I'll add it. 3 old yentas are sitting in a Jewish restaurant, and the maitre d' comes over at the end of the meal and said, "Ladies, was anything all right?"
And on that very amusing note, let's draw today's juicy show to a close. Huge thank you to you all for tuning in. And if we're going to see you at our live show tonight, do make sure to give Naomi and Alex a big cheer when they walk on stage, and give me a big beer when you see me in the bar at the after show event for our supporters, please.
And do not forget, our latest B-side episode will drop tomorrow, Friday, and with the anniversary of the horrific Southport attacks and ensuing riots, we're going to reflect on where things now stand in relation to freedom of speech and expression.
Make sure to get yourself signed up to back this little show by chucking us a $5 a month or more at ko-fi.com/QuietRiotPod. It means we can buck the trend in podcasting by gatekeeping nothing, bringing the show free to everyone at the same time.
We love you very, very much.
Bye.
Bye.
Quiet Riot is an audio production from Cooler Heads, written and produced by Andreou, Naomi Smith, and Kenny Campbell. Music by Mariana Sangeeta, artwork by Simona Canellu, and edited by me, Alex Reese.
Quiet Riot. I once had a row so bad with a boyfriend in IKEA in Leeds, well, it's on the outskirts of Leeds, that I drove off and left him there. I was going.
What was the argument?
I now obviously cannot remember any of the details of the argument.
I'm not having another
but I
Billy
do know
Book
he had
case
to
in my
get
life.